There's a moment, quiet, subtle, where everything changes. It's not when you scream. It's not when you beg for them to understand. It's not even when you walk away. It's when you stop reacting. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer trigger you, something in their world begins to unravel. Not because you fought back, but because you didn't. Because you didn't give them the chaos they crave. Because your silence speaks louder than any confrontation. You see, a narcissist doesn't just feed off attention, they feed off emotional energy. Especially yours. Your fear, guilt, and need to explain, defend, and prove your self-worth. That's what fuels the cycle. That's what keeps their illusion of control intact. But when your energy becomes regulated, when you begin to pause before reacting, when you choose stillness over survival mode, that's the moment they feel it. They don't say it. They might not even show it. But deep down, they panic. Because suddenly, you're not a puppet in their game anymore. You're no longer reacting to their accusations. You're no longer chasing closure from a toxic relationship that never offered real safety. You're simply choosing peace. And to someone who thrives on gaslighting, on pulling the strings of your emotional landscape, your stillness is terrifying. Your calm makes them feel invisible. They start to wonder. Why isn't she fighting back? Why isn't she trying to fix things? Why does she look free? They might even test you, drop a subtle jab, send a guilt-laced message, play the victim in front of mutual friends. Not because they care. But because they need to know if they still matter. If they still live rent-free inside your nervous system. But this time? You don't flinch. You don't take the bait. You don't break the silence. Because you've realized something they never wanted you to see. Your power doesn't come from how you respond to them. It comes from what you no longer respond to. This is not about stonewalling or coldness. This is about emotional regulation. This is about finally choosing you. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a moment where you wanted to react, but didn't? Where you felt the heat rise in your chest, but instead, you breathed? And in that breath, you remembered, I am not here to fix, to fight, or to prove. I am here to heal. Drop a speech balloon. I felt that shift. If this moment speaks to you. Because of that moment? That's not weakness. That's your awakening. At first, they won't believe it. When a narcissist realizes you're no longer responding the way you used to, they tell themselves it's temporary. A phase. You're just acting out. You'll be back. They're sure of it. Because in their mind, no one leaves them. Not for good. See, control isn't just a tool for the narcissist. It's their identity. Their entire psychological framework is built on the illusion of dominance. They don't have a solid sense of self. Their inner world is hollow, patched together with performance, projection, and the reactions of others. So, when do you stop reacting? You're not just setting boundaries. You're ripping the scaffolding out from under their identity. That's when the shift begins, from denial to panic. They start scanning for an explanation. Why isn't she playing her part? Who got to her? Because in their distorted world, autonomy doesn't exist. You couldn't possibly be acting out of self-worth. Someone must have poisoned you. Influenced you. Planted the seed. And that's when the paranoia creeps in. You'll see it in the way they watch you more closely. In the way they test you with little digs, subtle provocations, waiting to see if you'll crack. In the way they reach out, cold one day, sentimental the next. It's not confusion. It's a strategy. They're gauging whether the spell still works. Because what scares them most is not your anger. It's your emotional regulation. Your ability to remain calm when they try to ignite you. Your refusal to play the game. In that moment, they're not just losing control. They're losing their reflection. Remember, narcissists don't truly know who they are. They build their sense of self by controlling how others see them. So if they can no longer shape your perception, If they can't bait you into chasing, fixing, or doubting yourself, they begin to dissolve right in front of you. But here's the dangerous part. Before they let go, they escalate. They double down. They may say things designed to cut deep. They might bring up your insecurities, twist your past, or remind you of your darkest moments, not because it's true, but because it's all they have left. It's an attempt to reclaim just one thing, a reaction. Because if they can get a rise out of you, they know the door is still cracked open. But if you stay rooted, if you don't flinch, you'll witness something most people never do. The mask starts to slip. You see, narcissists are not confident. They're not powerful. They're terrified. Terrified of being unseen. Terrified of being irrelevant. Terrified of having to face who they are without someone else to define them. So what do? They oscillate between extremes. 1 minute, they're love bombing again. You're the only one who ever really understood me. Next, they're cold and cruel. I don't know why I ever trusted you. It's not logic. It's survival. This is the dance of a person who has lost control but refuses to accept it. And that's why your clarity is their collapse. Because when you regulate your nervous system, when you choose truth over trauma responses, when you walk away without needing a scene or a story, you're doing something revolutionary. You're showing the narcissist that their power, it was never real. It only existed because you believed in it. And now? Now, you don't. There's something you need to understand. Just because a narcissist knows they've lost control, doesn't mean they'll let go quietly. The opposite is true. Once they sense that you're no longer emotionally accessible, no longer reacting, no longer flinching, they panic. But that panic? It doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes, it looks like love. You'll receive messages at 2 a.m. Just wanted to say I miss you. Was thinking about that song we used to listen to. You'll never find anyone who knows you like I do. It's not nostalgia. It's manipulation. Because what they really mean is, I need to know I still have access to your nervous system. When kindness doesn't work, they pivot. They may begin smearing your name to mutual friends, subtle rumors, veiled concerns. She's not doing well lately. I don't know what happened, she just changed overnight. It's a classic gaslighting maneuver. They rewrite the story so that you look unstable, while they look calm, composed, and deeply wounded. Why? Because perception equals power. And if they can't control you directly, they'll try to control how others see you. If they can isolate you, confuse you, or get you to second-guess your reality, they still win. But if you stay grounded, if your emotional regulation holds, they escalate further. Now it's baiting. Suddenly, they accuse you of things that feel outrageous. I always knew you were lying to me. You've changed. You're so cold now. You're just like your mother. This isn't about truth. It's about chaos. Because when you're confused, you're vulnerable. When you're defending yourself, you're distracted. And when you're distracted, you're no longer focused on healing. You're back in their storm. So, how do you stay centered in the eye of it? You stop trying to explain. You stop giving your energy to correcting the lies. You stop showing up to defend a version of yourself they've already decided to reject. Instead, you focus on the only truth that matters. They're not upset because you betrayed them. They're upset because you reclaimed your peace. And peace to a narcissist feels like betrayal. Because it means you're no longer under their spell. They may send flying monkeys, people who come to you with concern cloaked as curiosity. Maybe you were too hard on them. Maybe they're just hurting and don't know how to show it. You should give them another chance. Everyone makes mistakes. Don't take the bait. People who enable manipulation, consciously or unconsciously, will always try to guilt you into silence. But guilt is not your compass. Clarity is. And clarity says, you're not responsible for managing someone else's unhealed wounds. Let's be clear, this isn't easy. There will be days when you question everything. When you wonder if you were too harsh. When the loneliness gets loud. When their absence feels heavier than their presence ever did. But that's not love you're missing. That's withdrawal. You're detoxing from a toxic relationship that was designed to make you believe you couldn't breathe without them. But you can. You are. Every day you stay in your peace, your power, your stillness. It is a day you weaken their hold. Eventually, they'll do one of two things. They'll either escalate, more desperate, more dramatic, more unpredictable. Or, they'll disengage. Not because they've healed. But because they've realized they can no longer feed off your energy. And that moment, when they stop reaching, when the calls stop coming, when the silence becomes real, might feel terrifying. You might ask. Did I make a mistake? Did I push too hard? Did I imagine the whole thing? No. You didn't. You simply stopped giving them what they never deserved in the first place. Unlimited access to your soul. You stopped being their supply. And that is the truest act of self-worth there is. So the next time they reach for you, through a message, through a rumor, through someone else, pause. Breathe. Feel your feet on the floor. And remember. Every attempt to pull you back in is just proof that you've already left. You don't need to scream. You don't need to fight, explain, or justify. All it takes is a moment. One breath. One sentence, spoken from complete presence. That's what truly unravels a narcissist. Not rage. Not revenge. But the kind of stillness that says, you no longer get to rent space in my mind. If you've ever reached that turning point, where something in your body says enough, where your nervous system suddenly stops reacting the way it used to, drop a speech balloon. I've felt it below. Let others know, they're not crazy. They're healing. You don't have to beat a narcissist at their game. You just have to stop playing it. And that's what terrifies them. They trained you to be predictable. To flinch when criticized. To explain when misunderstood. To defend when attacked. To give more when you've already given too much. But now? Now, you just breathe. Now, when they say something twisted, you don't correct them. You don't argue. You pause. You look them in the eye, maybe just in your imagination. And say, I see what you're doing. And it won't work anymore. That's the sentence. That's the turning point. That's the earthquake under the mask. Those words don't come from anger. They come from emotional regulation. From integration. From clarity. And to someone who lives in chaos, clarity feels like a slap in the face. Has anyone ever accused you of being cold or selfish the moment you set a boundary? That's not guilt, it's growth. Stay with that truth. You're not abandoning them. You're returning to yourself. The narcissist will try to bait you again. They'll raise their voice. They'll cry. They'll say you're abandoning them, being unfair, and overreacting. But this time, you don't flinch. You let their storm pass through you like wine through a canyon. Because deep down, you understand. Their rage isn't power. It's panic. Their silence isn't peace. It's punishment. Their love bombing isn't love. It's bait. And you? You've stepped out of that storm. You've returned to your self-worth. To your body. To the breath that never lied to you. So what happens next? They'll try one last thing. They'll test your boundaries. A text at midnight. A message through a friend. A memory laced I miss you on a day you're feeling low. And your body might tremble. Because part of you still remembers how it felt to be chosen. Even if it meant being controlled. But the stronger part? She remembers the silence after the storm. She remembers how your chest finally loosened. How your sleep got deeper. How your laughter slowly returned. And that part whispers. You don't have to go back. You already arrived. If you've ever had to remind yourself of the truth during weak moments, write "I choose peace" in the comments. It anchors you, and it helps someone else do the same. You don't need closure. You don't need them to admit what they did. You don't need the apology that never comes. You don't need to be understood by someone who built their power on gaslighting your reality. All you need, it is to tell the truth to yourself. I saw what it was. And I walked away. That sentence? It's not loud. It's not dramatic. But it's lethal to the illusion. Because once you see it, once you stop responding, once you reclaim the mic in your own story, they lose something they can never regain: control. The game ends, not with a fight, but with a pause. With your spine straight. Your voice is calm. Your spirit is rooted in something deeper than their approval. So when the moment comes, when they try again, when the mask slips, when they say, "You're not the person I fell in love with," you smile gently. And you whisper inside, "Exactly. I healed." And maybe, just maybe, your story becomes the spark someone else needs to rewrite theirs. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't always come with tears or big breakthroughs. Sometimes, healing is just pausing and choosing not to respond to something that would have broken you 6 months ago. That moment, when you breathe through the urge to explain, to prove, to beg. That's emotional freedom. You don't need a perfect comeback. You need clarity. And clarity says, "I don't owe this conversation my peace." If you've ever felt guilty for walking away from a toxic relationship, if you've ever second-guessed your own story because someone told you that you were too much, too emotional, too dramatic, this is for you. Because that's not the truth. That's conditioning. And your healing is in unlearning it. Unlearning the lie that your emotions are a burden. That your boundaries are punishments. That your needs are negotiable. Let this be the reminder. Boundaries are not betrayal. They are bridges to self-respect. Self-healing doesn't mean you never miss them. It means you don't go back to people who made you forget yourself. And that kind of healing, the kind that's rooted, intentional, powerful in its silence, doesn't need anyone's approval. It just needs your presence. Let's be honest. Healing often feels uncomfortable at first. Why? Because chaos felt familiar. Because emotional regulation wasn't modeled, only reactivity. Because stillness used to feel like abandonment. But now, you're retraining your nervous system. You're telling it, "We're safe now. We don't have to chase love that hurts anymore." That is trauma recovery in its truest form. And yes, it's slow. And yes, it's messy. And yes, you'll doubt yourself sometimes. But you will feel it. The moment you no longer flinch when they ghost you. The moment you stop rereading the last message. The moment you start trusting the silence. Have you ever caught yourself halfway through a text, realizing you don't need to send it? That's healing. Have you ever looked back on a moment and thought, "Wow, I used to break down over this, and now, I just breathe"? That's healing. It's happening in small moments. Every time you choose self-respect over self-sacrifice. Every time you pause instead of performing. Every time you whisper, "I don't need them to understand me, I just need to not abandon myself." Drop a red heart if you felt this kind of shift. Someone else reading this might need that reflection. And here's another truth you don't hear enough. Healing will often look like grief. Grieving the version of you who didn't know what you know now. The one who kept giving, even when it hurt. The one who stayed, not because she was weak, but because she was loyal to a fault. Honor her. She was doing her best with what she had. But you? You've evolved. Now, you know that real love doesn't ask you to disappear. That self-worth isn't something you prove, it's something you protect. You know that your validation doesn't live in their reaction. It lives in how gently you talk to yourself when no one's watching. And you know that not everyone deserves access to you just because they want it. That's not selfish. That's sacred. This isn't about becoming cold or untouchable. It's about becoming clear. Because when you get clear on your worth, you stop entertaining anything that confuses it. And that's what makes healing hard. You lose people. People who only liked you when you were easily controlled. People who thrived off your doubt. People who can't love you without dimming you. But what do you gain? Is peace. Peace that doesn't depend on their behavior. Peace that doesn't crumble when you're misunderstood. Peace that comes from knowing you're building a life, not a performance. And when that peace feels unfamiliar, when it feels boring, when your mind whispers, maybe the chaos was better. That's the trauma speaking. Don't let it decide for you. You're not addicted to the narcissist. You're addicted to the version of yourself you had to become to survive them. And now that version is resting. Now you're writing new stories. Ones where you don't need to be rescued. Because you're already saving yourself. So if no one's told you this lately, let me say it loud. You are not dramatic. You are not unstable. You are not broken. You are healing. And that is power. Let them say you've changed. They're right. Let them call you distant. That's called boundaries. Let them say you're cold. That's called emotional regulation. And let them wonder why you no longer beg, chase, or plead. It's because you've remembered. Your softness was never the problem. It was just given to the wrong hands. You've outgrown your old patterns. Now you're standing in your truth. And that? That is the beginning of everything. Some people fear confrontation. But narcissists? They fear your calm. They fear your silence. Your stillness. Your ability to walk away without needing to be understood. Because when you're calm, you're connected. And when you're connected, you are no longer programmable. That's the real power. Not louder boundaries. But quieter ones. Ones that don't ask for respect. Because they expect it. You don't need to scream your truth anymore. You've embodied it. And your body knows when something is off. You feel it. That's nervous system regulation. That's what real healing sounds like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of discernment. You can tell when someone is trying to trigger you. And instead of falling back into that old reflex, you pause. You breathe. You respond instead of react. That's emotional regulation. And narcissists can't stand it. Because if they can't make you angry, afraid, or desperate, they've lost their grip. Your energy used to be tangled in them. Explaining yourself, proving your worth, chasing their approval. Now, your energy is your own. That's the moment everything shifts. You're no longer available for their chaos. You're no longer the version of you that needed their love to feel whole. You're whole now. Even when you're alone. Even when no one understands you. Even when they try to rewrite the story. You stay grounded in your truth. And this grounded presence? It's the final boundary. Because there is no conversation to be had with someone who thrives on confusion. You've already said enough. Now, you simply live differently. You stop bleeding energy into places where you're not met with care. You stop explaining your needs to people who never listen. You stop rehearsing closure from people who lack accountability. Instead, you protect your emotional freedom. You honor your self-worth. You choose self-healing without waiting for permission. Let me say this clearly. Your stillness is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's not the silence of giving up. It's the quiet of having finally woken up. And when you meet their storm with inner calm, you reflect their dysfunction back to them. Not with accusation, but with detachment. They feel it. And it terrifies them. Because they can't manipulate someone who no longer seeks validation. They can't control someone who no longer reacts. They can't rewrite reality for someone who trusts their own perception. That's how you win. Not with rage, but with presence. Not by proving them wrong, but by no longer letting them define what's right. You become unshakable. Not because you're hard, but because you're aligned. And that stillness? That's what they'll remember most. Because people forget what you said. They forget what you did. But they never forget how your peace made them feel exposed. So when you reach this point, don't look back. You've broken the cycle. You've remembered your own power. You've stopped dancing with dysfunction. And started walking in your own rhythm. And even if they never admit it, even if they keep telling the story in a way that casts them as the victim, they know. They know you saw them. They know you stopped chasing. They know they lost access to you. Not because you punished them, but because you protected yourself. That's the difference. That's emotional sovereignty. That's the power of clarity. That's what stillness sounds like. So here's your reminder, in case you ever forget. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to convince anyone to believe you. You don't need to collapse just to keep someone else comfortable. Your body knows the truth. Your heart remembers peace. And your stillness is your strongest defense. Walk away. Stay rooted. Don't flinch. You're free now. And no one can take that from you.